Hey gang, welcome back to Ski Play Live TV. I'm inside, but not for long. I am going climbing, and yes, there's a global pandemic going on, and you need a partner to go rock climbing, and you might have people next to you on a route nearby. So, am I staying safe? Yes, as much as I possibly can. But I even went into a climbing gym this week. I was twice at Momentum in Mill Creek in Salt Lake City, and also once at the front climbing gym. Three times I went to the climbing gym last week, and I gotta tell you, it felt good to get back in the gym. I did 10 routes yesterday, and it was safe. Everything was very, very clean. The place was pretty much empty. You have to make a reservation now if you want to go inside. So you can see how many people have made reservations, how many spaces are available, check the time of day, and try and go when it's like there's nobody there. And once you go inside, everyone's wearing a face mask. There's hand sanitizer stations everywhere. When you actually climb, you can take your mask off, but then you put it back on as soon as you get back down. And make sure you use hand sanitizer because obviously you're touching ropes that everybody else has been on and holds that everybody else has used. But I feel okay. I guess I'll have to check back in a couple weeks and tell you if I'm healthy. But part of staying healthy during this whole thing is being able to exercise, whether you go into a gym or you're going outside. I've been hiking, I've been outside climbing, and am I crazy? I don't know. The Access Fund interviewed Paul Pottinger, and so I can get this right. Paul Pottinger is the director of infectious diseases and tropical medicine at the University of Washington Medical Center. And they talked to him about climbing during this pandemic and whether it's a smart thing and how to stay safe if you do go out and do it.
COVID-19 is a huge clinical spectrum. It runs the gamut from people who literally do not know that they are infected. They have no symptoms at all, to the obvious other end of the spectrum, which is a fatal infection, and everything in between. In the United States, most people with severe COVID are older. By definition, that means older than me. I'm 52. So people who are over the age of 60 or 65 are the ones who tend to get it the worst, and those who have a reduced immune system due to immunodeficiencies, chemotherapy, etc. I just want to say two things about that. Number one, not everybody who's over 65 and has COVID has a fatal experience. We have a lot of patients we have saved here in Seattle who've come through this fine. Yes, we have many people who are much younger than that who will get a severe case and they may not make it. So although there's a very small percentage of young people who get COVID-19, we do see it. We do not yet understand why some young people will have a terrible course. What the people we've lost here in my hospital, they seem to be totally normal, healthy, 20-something-year-old kids, and they didn't survive. How do you catch this infection? You've probably heard the issue about 6-foot personal space, right? They call it social distancing. I hate that term. I want us to be socially super close. Just physically distant, right? Physical distancing. So if you are 6 feet away from somebody, you are less likely to catch this infection. Why? The virus spreads in respiratory droplets. A droplet is that little hunk of spit or snot that comes out when you cough or sneeze or sing or laugh. I'm probably spreading droplets onto my keyboard right now here talking to you guys. There's droplets and there's droplets. So the droplets that we worry about the most are the larger droplets. They come in a variety of sizes. But the bigger and juicier they are, the more the hunk of snot that's coming out, the more virus will be in there, the more water that droplet has, and the more mucus from the human body that's there to protect it. This virus is not particularly hardy. It's actually a very fragile virus. It does not do well out of doors. We'll come back to this in a minute. It tends to get dried out. It tends to get killed by pH changes, temperature changes, ultraviolet light. So the bigger the snotlets that come out, the more risk that is of becoming a transmissible droplet. And those droplets that we worry about the most, yeah, they fall to the ground by gravity within about 6 feet of distance. And that's why we come up with this 6-foot thing. It is arbitrary. Is it possible to have a smaller droplet, what we call an aerosol, small enough that it would float on the air currents beyond 6 feet? Yes, absolutely, that can happen. You'll read about 13 feet, 27 feet. Do not be fooled. Those smaller droplets are very, very much less of a risk or a threat because they're too damn small. They may only contain a few viral particles. So the risk of catching this infection when you're out of doors is dramatically less than when you're indoors because of the dilutional effect of the air, the atmosphere, wind blowing along, etc. and also because it's a more harsh environment for this virus. Can you catch COVID-19 outside? Yes. Two people within 6 feet of each other, not doing good hand hygiene, not covering their cough, their sneeze, not wearing face coverings when they're close, and especially if one of those people is sick, just a little sick, just a little drip in the nose, just a little sneeze, just a little cough. I know it's not COVID, it's not so bad. That may very well be COVID. And so anybody who's symptomatic really needs to take a day off from cragging is what this comes down to. How do you prevent this as a mountaineer? Decide if you're going to go out at all. And you're not going to go out, pledge right now, you're not going to go out if you're sick. If you're sick, you got to stay home. As much as that sucks, that is the only way that we're actually going to bring this thing under control. Now, the opposite is an issue too. Unfortunately, you can spread this virus from yourself to somebody else, even if you don't feel sick. That's called asymptomatic shedding. Asymptomatic shedding is legit. It is real, and it's happened with other viruses before. There's a lot made about this in the media. Not a huge surprise. This is something that has come up previously. So I would say if you feel like you're ill with any kind of respiratory issues, you will stay home. If you choose to go out, you should make sure that you're well. Ideally, we'd have you go out within your household, people you've already been swapping spit, snot, and viruses with already. If you choose to go with other people, and let's face it, at least for me, that's why I go out to see my friends in the mountains. That's the whole point. So if you choose to go out, ideally, everyone would talk ahead of time, pledge that they're feeling well. I hate to say it, but ideally, the way you do it would be to drive separately. We're all about carpooling, right? That's our religion. But for this, being in a car with somebody who may be sick, actually that is a higher risk situation. You're really magnifying the amount of droplets that you're going to be. You're not going to just be driving, you're going to be talking to each other. I know what you're going to do. You can't do that in the same car. So I would say, unfortunately, I would have you drive separate. And then if you're close to one another, it really would be ideal to not only keep your 6-foot distance, but at least when you're getting set up before you actually get onto the face, onto the crag, to cover your mouth. It doesn't have to be a medical grade mask. In fact, please don't. But any kind of cloth covering, I especially like cotton, that can really help to reduce the chance of spreading viruses, spreading snotlets around. Again, if you're more than 6 feet away, you really do not need to do that, especially if you're out of doors. What about the things that we touch? Can you catch it by touching somebody that someone else has coughed on? Absolutely. That's a very real threat. The duration of the virus being viable on different surfaces, we're still trying to understand this. The best knowledge that we have is experimental, where someone takes an artificial sneeze machine and squirts it out onto different surfaces, and then they do testing to see how viable it is. It's highly variable. Paper products like cardboard may only be 12 to 24 hours. Certain cloth coverings, like cotton in particular, it's hard to even recover it from the cotton because the snotlet just sort of soaks right into the cotton. More slippery and smooth surfaces, the viability will be longer. I'm looking at you, plastic. I'm looking at surfaces that are like copper and steel, where it may last for several days at a time. I'm thinking in particular about the woven kern mantle on a dynamic climbing rope. On the one hand, it's a relatively oleophilic or hydrophobic surface, right? It's like synthetic plastic surface, very smooth surface, each strand of the kern mantle. That is actually a great place for a droplet to hang out. On the other hand, it is woven and braided to protect the core. And so, to my knowledge, nobody has actually gone out there. What a great experiment. Should be published in the Wilderness Medicine Journal, so we should go out there and look at this. But I don't know of anybody who's done that active research. To me, if you're going to be handling the rope, you've got somebody on belay, or you're leading and you know your belayer has been paying it out to you. Yes, in theory, when you touch that rope, you are touching what they have touched. If they haven't cleaned their hands, if they haven't covered their mouth, in theory, that is a risk to you. The risk would be very small. I wouldn't say zero, and I would say that if someone's handling, before they handle any shared implements like a rope, if you're going to do good hand hygiene, even with alcohol hand rub, yes, alcohol hand rub is great. It's a good way to kill this germ. That's a good way to start. Then cover your mouth, and then do your belay work. Touching the crag, touching an outdoor surface, to my knowledge, that's never been described as a mechanism of getting sick. It'd be hard to study. This particular virus does not do well out of doors. Ultraviolet light does tend to kill it. And so I think that actually handling the rock face, let's say you're going trad, somebody goes up lead climbs, and then you're following, the chance that you would catch it from them is small, not zero. I think when you get to the belay station, you should both do your alcohol hand rub, and then you'll be good. The way you get sick is by touching something and then touching your nose or your mouth. And if you can prevent that, then you're not going to get sick. We strongly believe that the risk of catching this from touching a surface is dramatically less outdoors than indoors. Why? It's just a more harsh environment. The air, the humidity changes, the ultraviolet light that hits that surface. When you're indoors, it's more of a static box of air. You're not getting that UV dose. And frankly, it's just easier for people to go up and down. There's probably going to be a higher inoculum on those surfaces. Having said so, I'm very pro climbing gym. I think climbing gyms are great. I think it could be done. To me, the things that I would want would be a written attestation from every employee and everyone who walks in through the door, whether they're a client or employee, that says that they are well. That has to be part of it. There has to be hand hygiene stations all over the place to make it easy for people to do their hand hygiene. And I would think there would be some kind of remediation of the environment, meaning that the holds would be cleaned periodically as people go through their process. Theoretically, if every person before they get on the wall, whether it's outside or inside, if they do their hand hygiene, and in theory, if they're also wearing a face covering, and to me, in a rock gym, I really do think that would be ideal. There's not that breeze that's going to take the viral particles away as you huff and puff going up the wall. But if your hands are clean and your face is covered, and you then clean your hands again when you come off the wall, it really should be relatively safe. The only time you're going to get burned is if you're lazy with your hand hygiene, if you're an asshole and you don't cover your face, or if you're around someone who's behaving in either of those two ways as well. It's a truly social process. And that's why I feel like, this community, the climbing community, we're all of the same ethos. It should be fine. We should be able to lead the way nationally like this. I don't know if the NRA works like that, but Access Fund people can work like that. So I really do think we can get back out there and do it in a safe way.